kill an underground music scene,
Yeah.
all you have to do is put it on a chart.
Right, yeah. The kiss of death.
Exactly. The very moment you measure it, the moment you track its data, the mainstream just swallows it whole.
Oh, for sure. It's instantly commodified.
Yep. So welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to essentially pull you into the immediate future of underground electronic dance music. We are looking specifically at the landscape in the year 2026.
Which is such a fascinating year to analyze.
It really is. And, to figure out how the underground actually survives when everyone is watching, we got our hands on something pretty incredible. It's this leaked, highly confidential internal document.
From a Miami-based company, right?
Yeah, exactly. 786 Music Publishing, LLC.
And honestly, it is a genuinely staggering piece of text to look at.
It's dense.
Very dense. We are basically looking at the internal run of show and the forecast notes for the season 1 finale of their show, Underground Stories.
Episode 6, I think.
Yeah.
Titled The 6-Month Forecast.
That's the one. And what makes this document so unique, it isn't just the raw predictions they make about dance music. I mean, those are interesting, but it's the format itself.
Right, because when people think of underground electronic music, the image that usually comes to mind is like, I don't know, a scribbled track list on a damp cocktail napkin at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, something totally chaotic, very loose, purely driven by feeling.
Exactly. But instead, this document reads like a militant briefing from a war room.
It's intense.
It really is. It is this urgent, authoritative, ruthlessly structured corporate blueprint. The internal notes literally demand, and I quote, a news desk for real dance music energy from its hosts.
Which is such a specific vibe to mandate.
Right. It dictates that their delivery must be fast, confident, and leave absolutely no room for wasted words.
No fluff allowed.
None. So today, we're going to unpack their specific 6-month predictions, their methodology, and what this super rigid structure actually reveals about the survival of independent music culture right now.
But to really make sense of any of their predictions, we first have to understand the two vastly different lenses that they use to build this 2026 forecast.
Yeah, let's get into the hosts, because the entire weight of this forecast rests on this synthesis between two specific people.
Right, James Sullivan and Sarah Mitchell.
And the document outlines this incredibly strict, almost symbiotic division of labor between the two of them. Like, they do not cross lanes.
Not at all. James is tasked entirely with the technical and analytical side.
He's the numbers guy.
Exactly. He is handling the data, the chart analysis, specifically examining things like the 2026 Beatport top genres, and he's breaking down independent production techniques.
And just to pause here for a second, for those of you listening who might not be completely immersed in the electronic ecosystem.
Yeah, it's an important distinction to make.
Right, because Beatport is not just like a streaming app.
No, it's not Spotify. Not even close.
Exactly. It's essentially a B2B platform. It's this real-time ledger of actual DJ purchasing habits.
Right. So if a track is moving up the Beatport charts, it means professional tastemakers are actively buying it right now to play in their sets tonight.
It's the stock market ticker for dance music.
That's a great way to put it. So James is watching the ticker.
Right. And then you have Sarah Mitchell. And Sarah is covering the cultural context. She is out there delivering the on-the-ground scene reporting.
Yeah, and to give you like a mental model for this dynamic, it feels exactly like a local weather team during a massive hurricane.
Oh, that is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The dynamic is practically identical.
Right, because James is the meteorologist safely inside the studio. He's staring at the Doppler radar data, he's tracking the barometric pressure of those Beatport charts, and he's just looking for mathematical anomalies.
Meanwhile, Sarah is the street reporter standing outside in the absolute pouring rain.
Wearing the poncho, just getting blasted by the wind.
Literally. She's feeling the wind, she's watching the floodwaters rise, and she's telling you what the storm actually feels like on the ground.
Because James tells you a storm is coming, but Sarah tells you whether people are actually running for cover or if they're, like, dancing in the rain.
Yeah, and the 786 music document makes it explicitly clear that one of those approaches without the other is entirely useless.
Completely useless. Their internal dialogue framework actually dictates this relentless back and forth between them.
Yeah, James leads with the hard chart analysis, bringing the mathematical reality right.
Right.
But Sarah is mandated to instantly follow up with the cultural context.
They are treating the synthesis of art and analytics with the seriousness of a Wall Street forecast.
They really are. But here is where I have to sort of throw a flag on the play, though.
Oh, okay. What's the issue?
Well, can you really truly quantify the underground with data. Like, if James is tracking underground music on a Beatport chart, doesn't the very act of it charting mean it has already lost its underground status?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. It goes back to that old paradox of observing a wild animal. The moment you capture the animal and put it in a cage to study it, its behavior fundamentally changes.
Yep, the observer effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the data has already captured the sound, hasn't the mainstream already commodified it?
So that tension right there is basically the central problem of the 2026 music industry. Because data like streaming numbers, chart positions, global download metrics, it's inherently a lagging indicator.
Meaning it's after the fact.
Exactly. Data can only ever show you what happened yesterday. It is just a historical record of a transaction that has already occurred.
So it's essentially an autopsy of a trend, not a crystal ball.
That's a great way to put it. Which is exactly why the dual approach mandated in this document is so critical for their survival.
Because James is only looking at the past.
Right. If James's data only shows what happened yesterday, Sarah's cultural domain, the scene reporting, that shows what will happen tomorrow.
She brings the leading indicators.
Exactly. She provides the leading indicators. She is out there looking at what DJs are actually playing in, like unrecorded, unpermitted warehouse sets.
Where there are no charts.
Zero charts. She is watching how a sweaty crowd of 500 people reacts to a very specific bass line before that track even has a name, let alone a chart position.
So Sarah essentially identifies the raw vibration in the room, and then James waits to see how that vibration creates a mathematical footprint later.
Yes. James grounds Sarah's cultural intuition in reality, and Sarah gives James's cold data a beating heart.
Wow, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And taking that synthesis a step further, if you look at the document's intense insistence on editorial discipline, it shows they are actually trying to outrun algorithmic scrapers.
Oh, right, because in 2026, major labels are just using AI to scrape data the millisecond a sound starts trending.
Exactly. So by demanding fast, authoritative context from Sarah right alongside James's data, they're essentially providing the human why behind the numbers.
Which is something an algorithm just cannot replicate.
Right. That context is their competitive moat.
And what's wild is this data meets culture methodology isn't just like theoretical posturing for them. The document actively applies this formula to predict the exact sounds that will dominate the next 6 months of global dance music.
Yeah, they get very specific.
Very. They break their forecast down into highly structured thematic blocks. So first, they establish the foundation by recapping the 5 biggest underground movements they've tracked over the season.
But then the heavyweights step into the ring.
Oh, yeah. They dedicate massive, completely protected blocks of their runtime to an in-depth 6-month forecast for 2 specific genres.
Afro House and Tech House.
Yep. And the sheer gravity the source material places on these 2 genres is impossible to ignore.
For sure. Because Afro House and Tech House are not treated as fleeting seasonal trends here. The document frames them as the absolute titans of the 2026 landscape.
They are the blue chip stocks of the underground.
Exactly. They represent these established, sprawling ecosystems.
Yeah.
When they forecast Afro House and Tech House, they are talking about the core infrastructure of the industry.
Right. The genres that dictate massive festival stages, the global touring circuits for DJs, the baseline sonic identity of major clubs.
So forecasting these titans requires analyzing very subtle shifts within massive, slow-moving vessels.
They basically pay the bills and keep the lights on.
They do.
But once the document pays its respects to those titans, the run of show shifts into what they call their wildcard block.
This is my favorite part.
Same. To me, this is where the entire philosophy of 786 music gets put to the ultimate test. They dedicate a vital segment of their finale to a subgenre that the document explicitly describes as something most people are not watching.
Yeah, Beat 4.
Right. James and Sarah fundamentally believe this invisible fringe sound will be the absolute biggest underground story next.
And the narrative hook written into their internal notes is incredibly aggressive here. They literally state their intention clearly to the audience. We are going to be specific, we are going to be bold, and we are going to let you hold us accountable.
Quote, "Let us go," unquote. That is the exact internal note they use to hype themselves up.
It's so good.
They are literally instructing their own audience to hold their feet to the fire over this wild card prediction. Which, it begs the question, why?
Why take the risk?
Yeah, why would you intentionally highlight a fringe genre that nobody's looking at and stake your entire journalistic reputation on it? Is this just like an ego play?
You mean just to say they were first?
Right. Are they just trying to secure clout so 6 months from now they can say, oh, we told you about this sound before it hit the mainstream?
I mean, I get why it looks that way, but it goes far deeper than ego. This is a matter of existential survival for an independent operator in 2026.
How so?
Think about the electronic music ecosystem as a massive corporation. Afro House and Tech House, those are your legacy products.
Okay, doing right.
They are reliable, they generate steady revenue, and they keep the massive machinery running. But the wildcard, that unproven fringe subgenre, that is your research and development department.
Oh, wow. So if you aren't actively funding the R&D department, your company is already functionally dead, even if the legacy products are still selling today.
Exactly. The wildcard represents the pure, chaotic innovation that prevents the entire scene from just stagnating.
That makes total sense.
The tone of the document, the demand to be bold and specific, proves that predicting the fringe is the absolute highest stakes game you can play. Major, well-funded corporate labels have millions of dollars to just throw at established trends.
They can just buy their way in.
Right. An independent operator's only competitive advantage is agility. You have to find the wave, analyze its trajectory, and position yourself perfectly before the ocean even swells.
But, spotting the wave is only half the battle.
True.
Like if you successfully identify the wildcard sound of 2026 using Sarah's cultural reporting and James's early data whispers, you still need a surfboard to ride it.
You need the infrastructure.
Exactly. You need the physical and business infrastructure to actually get that sound out of the warehouse and into the world. And that leads us directly into the shifting reality operating behind the scenes.
Yeah, because the document seamlessly transitions from forecasting sounds to forecasting the business landscape itself.
In Beat 5, I think?
Yep. They dedicate a specific analytical block to the state of independent labels, outlining exactly what, quote, smart operators should be doing to survive the current climate.
And the text mentions that alongside this business forecast, James delivers a highly technical production tip focusing specifically on independent production techniques.
Right, like utilizing hardware limitations as creative strengths.
Yes, or engineering these raw, unquantized beats that have a grit the hyper-polished mainstream labels simply cannot easily mimic.
It's about finding an edge.
Exactly. But before we dive any deeper into the actual business mechanics of it, we really need to address the elephant in the room here.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to bring up.
You have to. Because printed right there in the document is the official motto of 786 Music Publishing.
Yep. The vibe is the only rule.
The vibe is the only rule. I stared at that line for probably 10 minutes.
It's pretty funny in context.
It's a brilliant contradiction.
Yeah.
How on earth can the vibe be the only lie rule when we are sitting here analyzing a ruthlessly structured, minute-by-minute corporate blueprint?
It doesn't seem to fit.
Not at all. The document mandates segmented timeframes down to the second. It commands the hosts to deliver information with authoritative, disciplined precision. To me, this doesn't sound like a collective of underground artists operating on vibes. It sounds like a Fortune 500 board meeting for punk rockers.
Yeah, the paradox is super striking on the surface, but when you actually look at the hostile environment independent music faces in 2026, that paradox synthesizes into a pretty brilliant survival strategy.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's look at what a smart operator is actually up against right now.
Well, they're basically fighting a war against algorithmic gentrification.
Exactly. Major labels have consolidated power, the streaming platforms reward homogeneous, mathematically safe sounds, and underground scenes are mined for profit faster than ever before.
The AI scrapers we talked about earlier.
Right. Therefore, if your only rule in business is genuinely just vibes, like if you run your independent label purely on feeling, chaos, and a loose scribbled track list on a napkin, the corporate machinery will literally eat you alive.
You'll just get swallowed up.
You will run out of funding, your most innovative artists will be poached by major A&R reps the second they show promise, and your carefully cultivated underground scene will be gentrified and mass-produced in a matter of weeks.
Wait. So the rigid corporate structure we are seeing in this run of show isn't there to crush the vibe. It's a perimeter wall.
Yes.
They are building a fortress to protect the garden.
The fortress protects the garden. That's exactly it. Protecting the purity of the vibe actually requires intense, almost militant business discipline.
Wow.
To survive as an independent label amidst algorithmic consolidation, you need the ruthless structure that James and Sarah are deploying.
Let me build on that, because this honestly changes everything about how we view the underground.
Yeah, got it.
Imagine, like, a high-level hacker collective. On the surface, what they produce is chaotic, disruptive, and entirely anti-establishment.
Right.
But behind the screens, their actual code has to be flawlessly organized, militantly structured, and executed with absolute mathematical precision.
Perfect analogy.
That is what 786 Music is doing. They build these impenetrable walls of data analysis, chart tracking, and strict editorial discipline. And inside those walls, the art, the culture, and the messy vibe can actually flourish in total safety without being crushed by the industry.
Which is why when the document demands that James and Sarah sound fast, confident, and authoritative, that tone isn't just a broadcasting choice.
It's a defense mechanism.
That tone is armor. It is a way for the underground to assert its intrinsic value and authority without ever needing validation from the mainstream establishment.
They don't need permission to exist.
Exactly. They're treating their own culture with the ultimate reverence by taking it dead seriously on a business level.
It completely redefines what it means to be underground, doesn't it? Like the old cliche of the underground being obscure, unorganized, and purely reactionary is just dead.
Long gone.
In 2026, being a successful underground operator means you have to be sharper, more analytical, and more ruthlessly disciplined than the major labels.
You have to beat them at their own game.
Yeah. You have to know the Beatport charts inside and out, not so you can sell out and chase the algorithm, but so you can navigate the minefield and actively subvert it.
And that realization that the underground requires this fierce, organized defense, it perfectly sets up the final overarching thesis of the entire 786 Music document.
Yes, the big finale.
After they deliver a rapid-fire preview of their upcoming second season, the run of show outlines their ultimate closing statement.
And the final word of the season belongs to Sarah, right? The cultural reporter, the one standing out of the hurricane.
Yep, she gets the last word.
And the document lists her closing thesis statement as, quote, "Why the underground always wins in the end."
Placing that deeply philosophical thesis at the very end of a highly mathematical, business-oriented forecast is such a powerful structural choice.
It really pulls it all together.
It anchors all the data back to the human element.
It really does. So what is the ultimate takeaway for you listening to this deep dive?
There's a lot to unpack.
There is. We have traced this incredibly complex roadmap laid out in this 2026 forecast. We've seen the necessary friction between James's hard-lagging data and Sarah's raw, leading cultural intuition.
And how you absolutely need both the Doppler radar and the street reporter to truly understand the landscape.
Exactly. We examined the established titans looming on the 6-month horizon, the massive ecosystems of Afro House and Tech House.
And contrasted them with the vital, high-stakes necessity of staking your reputation on the unproven wildcard sound.
Right. And most importantly, we uncovered the great paradox of the modern independent music business. To truly ensure that the vibe remains the only rule, independent operators must balance the purity of their art with a militant, highly organized business structure.
The underground only survives if it is defended by smart operators who know how to build the fortress.
Which brings a completely new layer of meaning to Sarah's closing argument. If the underground is this heavily fortified, constantly evolving organism, it makes sense why she asserts that it always wins in the end.
But that assertion leaves us with a really fascinating thread to pull on.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. Think back to our opening idea, the wild animal fundamentally changing the moment it is placed in the cage of observation.
Or the underground sound dying the moment it hits a chart.
Right. If Sarah's right, and the underground always wins, we have to ask how it wins. Historically, the underground usually wins by bubbling up, proving its viability, and eventually becoming the new mainstream standard.
Because the unproven wildcard of today inevitably becomes the massive, blue-chip, tech house titan of tomorrow.
Exactly. Which means the victory is a double-edged sword. So here's a thought for you to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive. If the underground always wins by eventually becoming the new mainstream standard, does it actually win by destroying itself?
A phenomenal question. Because if the goal is to infiltrate the culture, the reward for success is literally the loss of your underground status.
Yeah. Perhaps the true underground isn't a physical destination at all. It isn't a specific warehouse or a particular subgenre or even a hidden chart position.
What do you think it is then?
Maybe the underground is just a temporary ghost, an incubator that only exists in that brief, wild, electrifying moment before the data finally catches up to the culture.
I love that. The moment James Sullivan successfully tracks it on a chart, the ghost has already moved on to the next warehouse.
And the chase begins all over again.